Hello, everyone. I am Scott Kober, one of the co-producers of Palooza Spring, and I would like to welcome you to our session, which is sponsored by Projects in Knowledge, powered by Kaplan. This session is entitled Navigating AI in Continuing Medical Education, a Strategic Approach. Our moderator for this session, who will introduce herself shortly, as well as the rest of the panel, is Alana Brody. Alana is the Executive Director of Projects in Knowledge, powered by Kaplan. AI topics are always, these days, really popular. A lot of people are asking for more education on AI, so hopefully people will find this session extremely useful, both personally and professionally. So before we begin, as with all of our CME Palooza sessions, I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors. Our gold sponsors, Haymarket Medical Education, Med Learning Group, and Projects in Knowledge. Our silver sponsors, Academic CME, Clinical Education Alliance, Daiichi Sankyo, DKB Med, Helio CME, Integrity CE, Medscape Education, Platform Q Health Education, and Talem Health. And our bronze sponsors, Answers in CME, XDev, Bowen Continuing Education, CMEology, Excalibur Medical Education, GibLib, Global Education Group, Infograph Ed, Integritas Communications, IBM Continuing Education, Leading Learning, MedIQ, Paradigm Medical Communications, Partners for Advancing Clinical Education, Pri-Med, Peerview Institute for Medical Education, Findico Medical Education, and Wright Medicine. So there are two ways to ask questions during this and all of our live CME Palooza Spring sessions. You can use the Horizon CME text line to send in a question. The number is 267-6660-CME. Or if you open up the viewing window in YouTube by clicking on Watch on YouTube in the lower left-hand corner of your window, you can enter in questions with the YouTube chat function. We will get to as many questions as we can throughout this session. So we will be incorporating audience response through Poll Everywhere. Hopefully by now most people have downloaded the Poll Everywhere app and will join the presentation entitled CME Palooza 005. I know Derek had a little trouble with this during our last session, but hopefully that has all been straightened by now. Or you can copy and paste the following URL into your web browser. Finally, note that the opinions, discussions, and or conclusions expressed are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or a position of their employer, its parent company, or their affiliates. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Alana, and I know that she wants to start with our first ARS question. So that is going to come up on your screen here in just a second.
Great, Scott. Thank you so much. And this question is our pre-test question for industry supporters only. So we want to know, how likely are you to support CME activities that incorporate AI technologies in the future? Okay, so while you guys are answering that, let me continue with our introductions. Enough about me. David Sediati is my colleague at Projects in Knowledge, powered by Kaplan. David is our Chief Technology Officer, and David has been working in AI and chatbots and artificial intelligence for a long time. He's over a decade, so he's very experienced in this. And then Karen Ruiz Cordell, I know many of you know, is in charge of medical education data analytics with Regeneron. So we heard a little bit this morning in Dean's session about some providers using AI in needs assessments or evaluating grants against strategy. So we're going to keep it real today because we do have two data heavyweights here with us, both of whom have many years of experience. As I mentioned, David's been developing AI for the PIK platform for over a decade, and Karen, Mike mentioned in his session that you're using AI on a regular basis. So that's good to know. Scott, can you bring up the second audience response question? Okay, great. So this is for everyone. Do you know the difference between natural language processing and generative AI, things like ChatGPT? Okay, good. We're getting some honesty here. I'm liking this.
Yes, I like this very much.
So David, maybe you can kick us off and
Yeah.
tell us, what is the difference between AI, machine learning, natural language processing, and generative AI?
Great. Thanks, Alana, and hi to all the viewers. Yeah, so this is a really good question because it sort of gets into the meat of all the jargon that's out there. The first jargon being AI. Even people know that as artificial intelligence. It's also known as augmented intelligence out there, and people talking about NLP, as you can see, or natural language processing, or image processing. That's another form of AI, as well as generative. So just to put it all in a nutshell, I'll just take it down to the basics. For those that, specifically those that are saying, no, they don't, it's a good answer. No, it doesn't make any sense, because a lot of these terms have been used interchangeably and sort of have convoluted what the purpose of these disciplines are. So just very basically, when you're talking about AI, you're talking about a system that is looking to mimic how we as humans interpret and look at information. So the first thing that could be is to look at a pattern. Think of looking at a data set and trying to understand, well, this plus this equals that. This plus this equals that. And a very basic calculation. So you're looking at AI to perform some of those basic calculations for you. So it's able to understand and recognize very basic patterns. That's how it all started with. It all started with, think of, basic computers or basic computing was all about that. So how can I analyze data, and how can I have a computer understand these patterns that I'm looking for? You do it in Excel all the time. When you look at these rows, say anytime it's over 0.5, make it green. Every time it's under, make it red. Well, now it's recognizing a pattern. So that's the basis of it. So we can also do that in natural language processing. When I look at this word, what does that word mean? And describe the pattern, how that word relates to other words. So that's the first step of AI. I know, Karen, you want to say something?
No, keep going, because
Okay.
I'm gonna wait, and then I'll.
Okay. So that's the first level. So you can use that with any type of discipline, whether that's recognizing patterns in numbers using mathematics. You can also recognize patterns in language, and that's where NLP comes from. Natural language processing. You can analyze patterns in languages, how people use certain patterns. Are they using verbs? What kind of verbs are they using? Are they using entities? What kind of nouns are attached to those verbs to give you a little bit more meaning? So that's how you would do natural language processing. Now, the second step now moves into predictions. So we call that, you can call it using a training set or using machine learning. You've heard these terms before, where AI can now understand and predict patterns. Of course, there's a level of error, but the idea is like, hey, if I can understand what a pattern is, maybe I can predict based on the history of the patterns that I've seen in a data set, some sort of prediction. So I can predict that this will occur more often, then it occurs less often, so on and so forth, because you've trained the machine to learn. So that's the second level. So now you've gone from recognizing a pattern to learning a pattern and predicting the pattern. Finally, we move into the last step, which is what we call deep learning. And this is now where not only can it predict a pattern, you can now train the AI machine to generate something based on that pattern. And that's where the generative AI comes into play. So if you're using generative AI on an NLP model, natural language processing model, now it could generate text, or can generate content, or generate data. Now, as you move through this, as you can see, you've gone for something that's very accurate and you're very sure of, a pattern that you've trained through or you understand, all the way to something where it's a pattern that maybe the computer is now has more error as it tries to figure out how to actually generate that data set. So you're going all the way from recognize a pattern to predicting a pattern to generating a pattern. And that's the difference between generative AI and generative AI with natural language processing.
That was excellent, David. Fantastic. That's probably the most concise definition I've ever heard. It's just Brian's comment.
Yeah,
I want to add on just a little bit, and this is like an add-on. It's not, that's a beautiful sort of progressive explanation of AI. I will say one of the strengths of AI or any kind of machine learning or natural language processing is that you're creating algorithms, which are actually formulas, to help you understand latent similarities within your data set. So this is an important thing because we, with our eyes, we cannot typically pull out those patterns. They're latent, meaning they're sort of below the surface. So machine learning and natural language processing as well, to a degree, allows us to do that. I would also say that when it comes to we're allowing more error in, but keep in mind that the way in which these programs run, typically, not always, but it's oftentimes a neural network, which means that the connections that are made between those nodes and the creation of those algorithms very much mimics the human brain and how it works. That is why oftentimes you will see the mistakes that are made in, say, ChatGPT or generative AI. They feel very human, and you notice I'm saying feel because it's a program. It doesn't feel, but that I think is sometimes what can I don't want to say trick, maybe manipulate. I mean, I'm using these kind of human words, but us into kind of accepting some of that generative, text or whatever it is that happens.
So you want to trust it, right? That it's
Right, exactly. And I think we need to, the reason why we've kind of developed this almost hysterical kind of mindset when it comes to AI is because from the very beginning, Alana, to your point, we're sort of ascribing these emotional, qualities to a program that is just running exactly the way that David describes on algorithms. So anyway, that's my texture to that question.
Sure. That's great. So Scott, can we have the next audience response question, please? Because this is going to lead us into the next part of our conversation. So we sort of have an admission from the audience that we don't really understand it, which I'm right there with you. But where are you in terms of adopting AI? Next question, Scott. I guess it's the third one. Yep. Where are you in terms of adopting AI into your activities? So we're in deep, we're using it daily, we're using it a bit, we're evaluating it, but not using it quite yet, and we're not using it at all. All right, so this is good. People are testing the waters, it seems like. So David, I'll ask you to start again. What do you think is the value of AI?
Yeah, great. And I think what you're seeing here is indicative of what I was saying. There's levels of AI, right? So I think as you look at the very basic pieces that we're talking about, it's helping you when we're using it a bit. I'm sure people are using it in spreadsheets. I'm sure people are using it potentially if you're using generative, you're testing the waters and seeing what kind of responses you're getting back, right? You're using a computer system and you're using it to evaluate data to provide insights, right? And depending on where you are on that spectrum of how much you trust what you're getting back, you're going to start using it either more or less, right? And I think there's a couple terms that just I think we'll try to keep this as easy as possible. I think there's a couple terms that have already been mentioned that we didn't define. So one of them, I believe, Karen, you mentioned what were you using? It was I can't remember the term, but it was the term where the model that we're using here, whether it's mimicking the human brain and like a
neural network.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. So neural network. So neural network is a type of AI. So there are other types of AI, and the neural network is a form where they're mimicking how the human brains and comes up with different responses to come up with certain responses that meet the standard of what you want the output to be. So meaning if it's generative AI, you want it to make it look like as close of an answer as that meets the data criteria. And you can use a neural network, but you can also use very simply other mathematical concepts, like, not to get too deep, but linear regression, which is what we know as curve fitting. You fit the curve and you do an extrapolation, right? Or interpolation. You can use all these types of things. So these are just different tools that you have in your tool bag. The tool bag is not one size fits all. So you want to use the right tool for the right job, right? So just want to bring that up, because as we try to find the right value for AI that you want to use in your system, as everyone's experimenting, you want to make sure that you use the tool that meets the job that you're looking to do, whether that's in radiology, right? In radiology, you want to do image recognition. The right tool for image recognition might not be the right tool for natural language processing, which might not be the right tool for a data analysis to provide insights, right? So you want to use the right tool that does the right job. So again, that's just to give you a little bit more context. The other piece was, we talked about generative, and we talked about, hey, this might be real. So there's another word that you'll hear, and that's called synthetic. So the data that the tool provides out is synthetic data, because what generative is building is not real. It's real, like it looks like it can be real, but it only becomes real, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is when you look at it as a human to define and make modifications to that response to say, oh, now I've validated this, and now this could be a real piece of content or a real piece of data that I can validate and vet. Before that, it's a synthetic data set that comes out of a machine. So I just want to give a little bit of definition.
I think this is really important what you just said, David, because my concern now at kind of this, infancy of AI in our industry is the misuse, right? That using using the chainsaw when you needed a hammer, and I think that before, that aspect, the guardrails, like we need to sort of start talking about that. What is the appropriate tool? I mean, the reality is it looks like we don't know. And I'm talking about us as an industry, and that's absolutely fair. I don't think that it means that we need to, get rid of it. It's too much. It's frightening. It's not, no. I mean, it's too late anyway. But I do think that, your comments about validating the responses, this is very important. And then I love this idea of the answer is unreal or synthetic until you make it real, right? And until you ascribe meaning to it. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form that you or anyone else is suggesting that we accept generative AI as necessarily the factual end all be all answer. It oftentimes is not. So understanding those limitations for each of those tools is extremely important. And that's where, I think it's an exciting time for our industry, because we have this entirely new avenue to expand on.
But it's a tool, right? So we have to use it as a tool and consider it as any other tool where it would inform the work that we're doing.
Right.
And I think that's the thing, right? It starts as a tool, and it can move towards an even better tool with automation. So to your question, Ilana, like what's the value of it, where it can be used? You can already think about, helping it automate tasks. You can think about making predictions. You can looking at large data sets. It's like you would stay up all night reading all these documents. Why would you do that when you can have something that can help you abstract the important pieces out of it, right? Of course, you would vet it and you'd look at it yourself and spot check it, but those are things that can help. Personalization, analyzing data. These are all things, in fact, that you're already using in the consumer space. So like AI is already being used when you're in your Amazon shopping cart, right, and it's already recommending you what they think that you might like based on what you've already looked at. Of course, it's up to you to make the choice to purchase it, right? It's up to you to decide whether it did the right job, but it's already helping you. It's already making things easier and faster for you to use. So,
and I think if on a daily basis, let's take outcomes out of it, but on a daily basis, if you're thinking of it in that way, that as an entry level, assistant in some way, you're not going to ask, an entry level person to write an entire, email to C-suite and not read it over. I mean, so I think that, there's this idea that like, oh my God, it's fooling us and it's fake and it's creating all this, not factual sort of output. Well, that's what it does. It's just so in some cases, just scraping the internet and coming out with what are the, highest weight sort of objects for it to sort of output or generate. So, I there is an absolute responsibility and level of integrity and ethics that we need to sort of discuss and talk about and I think agree upon in our industry as well. Like, I mean, it's not okay to use AI to generate content, right? For a CME program. Full stop. So anyway, yeah, I went a little further there, but
Yeah, no, that's good. We're gonna get into that. That's good. So
Actually, if I could just add on one piece to this,
Yeah.
on the value, I think we're just starting to get to the beginning of the value, right? So as I mentioned before, AI starts as pattern recognition and gets even better as you train it, right? So the idea here is that as you start using AI, it gets better when you tell it what is correct and what's incorrect, right? So and that's why I say it's the tip of the iceberg. For those that are just starting to use AI, the idea is that you want to use AI and give it feedback. You want to say, no, you want to go down this road, not that road. You want to look at this and not that.
This is, can you stop for just 1 second? And I know I'm probably getting off script because this is what I do, but you're saying something very important that I'm pretty sure most people have heard: training your model. I don't think people fully understand what that means. Can you, like, kind of with a real use example, kind of, you know, more than tell it what it needs, like what types of prompts? Let's say you want a summary of, you're presenting, I don't know, a summary of learner comments to a medical, a clinician audience, and it's in the area of dermatology. It's in skin cancer. What could you tell what could you tell, you know, your chat bot or your, you know, what would you tell AI in order to train it better?
Right. No, that's a great
I
question.
mean, maybe even to follow up on Karen's comment, talk about what training a chatbot, you know, how we do it a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's two sides to this, right? There's the there's the providers that bring out the chatbot and the training they do to provide an answer set, and then there's the learner that's using the chatbot and the training it can give to the chatbot to sort of reiterate and sort of iterate on those responses. In both cases, so for the first part, if you're training this chatbot, you're going to give it a set of questions that you think it should be answering, and you're going to pair that with responses. It could be, you know, what are the first line therapies available for dermatology for this particular type of dermatology disease that you have. Okay, well here's the question and here are the responses, and you would train that, and that would be what we call the base level training, and that what we call like the seed training. Now the chatbot would only respond with those if it was never trained again. So it would say, okay, here's the question, here's the response. Here's the question, here's the response. This is what I was trained to do. But unlike standard algorithms, the best part of AI is now you can retrain it, and you can, as it requires a response, because everything changes in this world, and this is what we're finding. Data that was accurate one day changes the next week. Hey, there's a new guideline. Hey, there's something new that's come out in that space. Hey, there's a new study. Well, how do you actually put that back in the system? Well, you do it by retraining. It understands, oh, I knew this before, but now that I gave a response, and now you as a learner or you as the provider can say, now there's been an augmentation to that, and now this is the better answer. That was a good answer, but this is an even better answer. And now you train the bot, and now the bot understands what was right previously and what is right today, and can build that context because it has a base training set to build itself from. So it's like akin to having a toddler or a baby. It's going to learn how to crawl before it learns how to stand, before it learns how to walk. This is the same thing with an AI system. And that's why I'm saying we're at the beginning. We're at actually the crawling stage right now. And in fact, at the crawling stage, you can see already value. Now wait till you can now provide good input and good training back in to make it go to the next stage. And that's where the value will even arrive exponentially as it keeps in pace with the data that's coming out in all our industries.
Great. All right, Scott, I think we're ready for another audience response question, because I think this is going to build upon, again, what we've been talking about since it's a new tool. So for the audience, this is for everyone. What concerns, if any, do you have regarding the integration of AI in CME, specifically data privacy and security, reliability and accuracy of AI-driven assessments, like outcomes reports, potential bias in content delivery, lack of human interaction in learning processes, and that it will take CME professional jobs. So a little bit of everything. Reliability and accuracy of AI-driven assessment seems to be what most folks are concerned about, which I think that David, you and Karen would agree with. Do you want to talk about for a second about taking CME professional jobs? I know you have an opinion on that.
I could start. Yeah, in terms of taking jobs, the way you should be looking at this is like we just talked about. It's a tool. This is an extra tool. So in your job, it's not going to replace jobs. It's going to replace certain tasks. It's going to make certain tasks easier for you to do. And if you're using the tool and you understand how to use the tool, then you're going to have the leg up over someone that's not using the tool. Just like we talked about before, if you went from using, a regular to using. Did I drop? Okay. So if you went from using a regular calculator to do your arithmetic to now using a spreadsheet, that's the difference. If you're using the spreadsheet, you're gonna do your job a lot quicker and be able to analyze more data than you could if you're using the calculator. So that's how we're looking at this technology in terms of task replacement or task augmentation rather than changing of jobs or taking people's jobs.
Right, because when we prepped for this session, you both shared with me that you weren't really concerned that AI was going to take CME professional jobs, that we're not going to use AI. We shouldn't be using AI for content development.
Right.
We should use it as we should use it as a tool, the same as we would use other tools to bring content information forward, but it's still up to us to verify everything.
I mean, that said, it's also, I see you, Scott. That said, just real quick, but let's not downplay that it's very attractive. Generative AI can be very attractive. When you ask it to do something it shouldn't do, like, I don't know, write some question sets or something, and at first it's like, I can't really do that. And then it does it anyway. And you look at it and you're like, you know what? Wow, this looks really good. Maybe I can use it for this. The problem with AI, generative AI, right now, that may not be in the future, but right now, is that it's pretty valid. It's pretty like face validity. It is not reliable. You will never get the same answer twice. I mean, that's right. Shifting, and it will get better and better and better. But it is attractive. Like, let's not lie. It's attractive to make it do things that it shouldn't.
Yeah. So let me just chime in one comment that came in on the Horizon CME text line. All right. So this is what somebody wrote. I just asked ChatGPT to help me collate evaluation data, and somehow it spat out that we need to be more inclusive of, quote, purple left-handed women. Haha. So yes, accuracy is a concern.
Okay, well,
I think that that's a true output, but I appreciate the sentiment of it. And I will say, well, this is the problem, depending on what type of generative AI you're using and where it's getting its data, right? You could be using a data lake and then it's only pulling from its own data set. But yeah, I mean, if you're scraping the internet, you're going to get the internet, like all of it. You're not, you're sort of opening up yourself to contamination and what do they call it? Hallucinations or, whatever. So yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example of, well, I mean, I have a few comments on that. I don't think that if you gave it the data that it would necessarily come up with that. But again, I think it's a good example of, don't trust everything that the output every time. It's not for a generative AI. This is very different, though, if you're doing, like David was talking about before, like predictive modeling, and you have a closed data set. You're doing machine learning. Then it's not an issue because you have a closed data set, or you're working within a data lake. And then all of these things are actually, much more easier to sort of control.
And I sort of would add, so just the way it's working right now. So we quickly jumped from a supervised machine learning model to
right.
the ChatGPT being put out there as generative. And I think it was done in a way to just shock the world. Wow, look at how good we can make synthetic data. Look, it can pass the basic sniff test.
Yeah.
But as you go deeper, you realize, oh, wait a second. On the surface, it looked good, but underneath, the details are missing. Certain details are missing. And you could see that in the original image, right? Like, oh, it made people with 2 left hands. It did all these things. It's because it didn't understand and didn't know. And it was coming, like you said, from an internet data source versus a vetted data source where someone has trained it all the way up, right? There's still that gap. And we're quick to rush to the shiny object, but the reality is we can continue working on our models and make them better and better and better. We will eventually get there. But we will get there because we're actually using human interactions, and we're vetting that data set and training it the right way, in the way that we think meets the need. Like I said, you're getting the right tool to do the right job, and making it humanocentric. There's certain things that these systems, AI systems, computer systems, I've worked with computer systems all my life. I know there's a pro and con to it. There's a pro and con to like what a computer system can do, and there's a con to what a computer system can do. It can't handle all the contextual information, can't handle emotions, can't understand how to discern certain things. It can't aggregate data because it's garbage in, garbage out. If the original data set wasn't clear and accurate enough, then if it tries to predict based on that data set, the predictions will be way off, right? So it's the same reason why we still can't predict weather. It's the same. There's so many intangibles that still need to be worked through to get us to that state where we want to be. And that's why we need to iterate on that process.
All right, so I have another question that came in on the Horizon CME text line. So I'm just going to read this to you. On the one hand, you said always review and edit. Then you later said it's not reliable and don't use it for content or questions. Why wouldn't the review and edit mantra not hold true for content?
I mean, I think it goes back to, are you vetting your sources? I would not allow it to create content from an open AI that is like scraping the internet. I just think it just depends, right? But also, I personally, and David, please, and whoever wants to argue with me can fight me. It's fine. I'm totally okay with that. I love that.
She says that she's rolling up her sleeves.
Yeah, I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm ready. I just don't think that I don't think that generative AI is currently at the place where it can just handle that task. That's just too large of a task right now. If we're talking about creating content, I'm only talking about that. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, Karen, because first of all, generative AI is based on what's called an LLM. So I'm going to throw more acronyms and I'll try to define them. So LLM is a large language model. And that large language model is based off of scraping internet, scraping publications, scraping all this. How do you know? How is the AI supposed to know which is correct and incorrect? Specifically when you get into areas where it's not clear cut, right? So, and we haven't talked about bias yet, right? So there's, it's gonna bring in the bias that it picks up off the internet unless it's trained accurately. So you want to be careful about that. In fact, when you build it, like I said before, you want to start building your own model, and those models, those LLM models are brought in by those companies that are building it. So whether it's ChatGPT, then you're talking about Microsoft, or if you're talking about the other models, maybe it's Google. You want to think about how you can build your own language models. Like if we want to break it down, like why don't we start by, if we're talking about the CME space, why don't we standardize on the nomenclature that we use within the CME space, and why don't we build from there? And once we understand that nomenclature, have a good data dictionary, let's normalize our data sets. Let's normalize the feedback. Let's normalize what makes sense in the learning space, in the CME learning space or CPD learning space. And that's where we can start to build from.
I think that's such a good point. And I think that you just encapsulated much more articulately than I did, in the sense that, I think we need to start at the beginning, right? We're jumping way ahead. If we're talking about creating content and like that's too far. We haven't even defined our terms. Data dictionary is so important. That's how you start every analysis, every study, every database. Like, we need to begin simply before we start jumping to creating content.
And
so
I think
go ahead.
I was just going to add one piece, Alana. I think, the original question before we got into this, I'm not sure if it was a tangent or not, but, I think it was all very important terms. It's like, how do you produce a CME program using AI?
I was
Well,
just saying, yep.
you're going to produce it the same way you currently produce it, but now you're going to have extra tools to help you along the way. So, you're not going to source your data from the internet. That's not how you develop a CME program. You're going to do a proper literature search, but now you can use AI to help you on that literature search, right? You're going to pull the information, the concepts that are key to you and build from there. You're still going to look for evidence-based medicine. And who's going to look for that? The computer can't tell you, or the AI algorithm can't tell you what's the proper evidence-based medicine. You're going to need your experts to help you through that process, but you're going to go through all of that, of course, using AI tools, which are appropriate along the way to build it all the way through. And then you're going to come up with response. And maybe once you have that model and you have a good NLP, now you can say, okay, generate me some content that I'm going to vet through anyways, and make sure that's reliable and accurate and returns the same response every time I ask it, and make sure that that's in that closed loop. So that's how you're going to start now. And as we become more comfortable and trust the data and do more training, we can now go to that next version and leg that up. And then we can get to understanding, oh, maybe there are certain things that this is better at finding for us, or insights that this can provide for us. But you're going to still follow all the same validations, and who's going to test it for bias? The best people to test it for bias, are the experts. And then you can use the AI to help guide you, but you can still put that through, so you can, and then go through your compliance and peer review, so on and so forth. So that's how you put a CME program. You're gonna augment it using AI to help with your productivity, but you're not going to put it in fully automated mode and think that it's going to generate all what you need based on it just traversing the internet.
David, I have a question for you. It just sort of came to me, and I think this is, and listen, you are extremely knowledgeable. I've been using these tools for many, many years, and in a much wider scope than I have. Do you think it's necessary for the people utilizing like a generative AI, right? We're not talking about building models. We're not like utilizing a generative AI. Do you think that you need to understand the large language modeling behind it, and how do you think that's necessary or not? And I'm asking more from a business perspective, because obviously we're all using it to do things in our personal lives, perhaps. But what about from a more professional standpoint?
No, it's a great question, Karen. So I think from, if you're an AI head and you want to understand the science behind it, sure, you need to know exactly the bits and the bytes and the processing part of, let's say, a neural network and our other deep learning models. But what's most important when you're evaluating an AI system is that you understand where it's pulling its evidence list from, where its source data is from. Yeah. So that's key, because that's the core. That's the ingredients to make this meal, right? You want to know, is it organic? Is it this? Is it from California? Like, you want to know what's being put into this quality that you want, right? Because it starts with the quality, it starts with the ingredients. So you need to know that. And you need to know how to evaluate the response and outcome. Those are the two parts, because actually the beauty of AI is the middle part is actually what computers can do best. It can try all the permutations, all the combinations, and try all the different things based on the ingredients that you give it and based on the outcome that you're looking for. But you have to be very clear of what ingredients you want it to use, and you have to have the right boundaries in place to say, this is what the outcome should have and use. And people are doing that in generative right now using prompt engineering. You're going to see all kinds of things around prompt engineering. That prompt engineering is great for evaluating the boundaries of the response that you want. Mm-hmm. But what's missing is it's not allowing you to tell it what ingredients you want to use to get that response that you want. And that's where the shortfall and the gap lies right now. And that's what I'm saying. Well, we got excited by looking at the end product, which is great, because that inspires us to tell us, hey, this is what this technology can do for us. But now we should double down and go back and say, okay, now let's get a little bit better at understanding what ingredients we need to put into the system, so we can actually generate high quality responses, not just any response that can be synthetic, that doesn't pass the muster that we need for proper CME.
So David, let me throw in one question that sort of kind of goes along with this. So two things. First of all, somebody just asked a question about examples of what you input into AI and what your results were. We did that in the fall of last year. We did a session that kind of looked at that. So I would recommend that people can look back at that. But here's the question for you that came over. Hold on a second. Do you have any recommendations for natural language processing tools? Are there any good free ones? This is a question that I hear a lot.
Great question. Actually, in fact, well, there's a number of tools that are out there. All the big guys have them. Amazon has a set of tools around healthcare. IBM has a set of tools. Google has a set of tools. So I would say you can start there and start playing there. I think that the trick here, though, is you want to make sure that what they define and the language that they're looking for match that data dictionary that we talked about. So I would start by what's your internal data dictionary, and then find the tools to match, right? So look at all of them, and we're experimenting with all of them. The other thing is there's a lot in the public domain, specifically, you know what, there's a couple in the public domain. They're Python modules, not to get too deep into it, that are available open source. You can pick those up, and those are the guts. It's almost like the engine, and you can apply any data dictionary to those to start building up. You know, and I think between those different pieces and playing with what's already available, where they've pre-canned, and others where you can build your own language module, you can start to now compare and contrast what works better for the application that you're looking for. And I'm sorry I don't have the public domain ones, but I'm happy to share it after this. And Scott, I can give you a whole list of different public domain pieces. And there's a lot. In fact, a lot of the commercial tools are built off of those that are out there right now.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah, if we could have something we can just put like a PDF up on the website along with the archive of the session. I think that would be helpful for people.
Great. So can we talk a little bit about maybe some examples, David, of insights that can be generated from CME-based AI activities?
Sure. And actually, that's a good segue, from the deeper pieces and what's nice about using an AI tool, for example. So I'll just use an example of what we're currently doing. So part of the chatbots that we're using at Projects in Knowledge is basically a question and response chatbot. So just think about it. You ask a question, and it's going to return back a response, and it's actually returning the response. So this is not generative. So just saying that out loud, the response is actually not made by the AI system. The response is made by authors, but we're now being able to match the question that someone has to that particular excerpt that the author has put together. And it's doing that not by a keyword search, which is what, sort of the standard searching has been until now, but by a semantic style AI search. So it's actually breaking down when you ask a question, it says, oh, what's the intent of this question? What does this have to do with? And it's actually indexing the same types of intents and entities using NLP for all the responses and providing matches. So that makes a more accurate match. So for one, the neat part of that is it provides better engagement, because if you get better matches based on a question that you're having, you're going to want to re-engage a little bit more often. And we can measure that engagement, which is very important for learning, right? So you want to have good feedback, and you can engage back with the bot, say, that was a great match, give me another one. So it's giving you that. And if the match wasn't good, it can present match options. So I'm saying all that just to give you the background of how it works. But what you get back in terms of data for outcomes is now you know how long a learner's spending on a program, how much time they're spending at a response. Are they looking for more content after that response? So giving you feedback back as a provider, oh, wait a second, that content actually matched. Oh, it didn't match. Well, there's a content gap, right? From the content that we're providing. On the flip side, on the learner side, we can actually understand what are the learner gaps. The learner's asking questions. They're asking questions because they're seeking content. There's a learner gap in terms of that needs to be addressed. So, and now you can match what the learner gaps are with the content gaps, and you now provide yet the next level of iteration, both on content and both on the learner, as well as you have more feedback to improve your engine, your AI engine, to provide better matches. So again, a bunch of things there. You have quantitative understanding gaps. You have engagement where you can see greater engagement or lesser engagement, and that will provide you another opportunity. And then you get verbatim responses, which maybe the system can't interpret yet, but you, as a professional, CME professional, you can interpret the actual questions that are being asked and try to understand and find patterns through there. So just a few different ways.
Yes, Brian, I agree.
So maybe that can be OSP 2.0. But I know that we've had some experiences with identifying target audiences that we might not have expected on different activities. You know, we'll see individuals from target audiences, maybe that activity wasn't directed to, and then take that back to our clinical team and say, you know, what's happening here, right? Like, why are individuals from ENT doctors, why are they asking questions on a multiple myeloma activity? And then, you know, find out that maybe something like multiple myeloma is diagnosed sometimes by an ENT because the patient presents with a sore throat, examples like that, that I know have been very helpful in some of the development of some of our activities. So Karen, let me ask you now, what are ways that AI tools that we discussed today might be able to be used to improve outcomes or outcomes reports?
I don't think I want to answer that. I don't know, honestly. And if people who've worked with me know I don't want to answer that, because I don't want to answer that because I like to provide ideas, but I don't like to, like, I love how this industry from an outcomes perspective has evolved, just sort of ideas building one, you know, after the other. I mean, I think that I've presented a few times now on sort of using AI in order to, using natural language processing, machine learning, et cetera, on really sort of identifying patterns within larger data sets. I think that that's nothing new. I feel like, honestly, I want to see where the industry takes things. So for us, the way that I use natural language processing currently, and this just natural language processing, I use modeling in a different way, predictive modeling, but I use it in order to identify themes within and across disease states. And each disease state actually has its own model, and that model trains iteratively. It trains every single day. So, you know, we went from, you know, 0 data to we might be more than this, but like, you know, 4.7 million learner interactions currently that are feeding those models. So we've built a pretty robust internal system in order to really pull out themes. And this is a closed system. Let me make that clear. This is not an open source. But in terms of where I see AI, you know, going, you know, in terms of outcomes, like, I don't even want to say. I want, you know, I want to see where it goes. I think that could be incredibly interesting.
Well, we'll look forward to more about that maybe later. So David, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience about, you know, how we're using AI or other insights that you might have?
I would just add on just one last piece to Karen's piece, and she's looking at themes, but definitely when you're able to capture the data, both the people using the AI system and the responses they're getting and their interactions, you're able to start generating trend lines, right? So this data becomes a good proprietary data set that you can share and you can build upon and make better, right? And that's the whole point of all this, right? The point of all this is you want to start organizing your data from the beginning, so it's easy for you to evaluate it and build a longitudinal set that you can share back and share the change, right? And the idea is that, you know, this may revolutionize how we measure data, right? So as you start measuring it this way, then it's within the flow, right? I didn't bring this up before, but you're now within the flow of how someone learns versus, oh, you got to write the pretest first and then do the learning and then do the post-it. Well, how about if there's ways of measuring while they're learning or measuring why they need the content, and you have a quantitative way, objective way of measuring that? I think that's where we can get to with this.
I also think too, now this, you know, of course ideas are generating, but I think that AI can give us the capacity as an industry to more more reliably, possibly, integrate qualitative data in a way that we couldn't before. I mean, I've been in this industry a long time, and I always loved qualitative analytics, and I was never happy with sort of what I was seeing. And now that is not the case. There is a lot of AI-based qualitative analyses that are going on, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, I love, like, now, say it used to be like a big deal, mixed methods. Oh my God, qual and quant. Nobody's doing this. Everybody's doing this. Like, it's fantastic. So I think, I don't even want to predict where it's going, because I like what I'm seeing very, very much. It's exciting.
Have you seen qualitative data from other sources than evaluation forms from activities?
Yeah. Because there are different types of, different formats of educational programming. Some small group education is all about the dialogue, right? So you're getting all of that dialogue, and then if you process it from, utilizing qualitative tools, I mean, that data is rich. And also, as an industry, and I'm looking at the supporters right now, time for us to move a little bit away from the heavy weights on large ends. That's not necessarily where you're going to be able to pull the most evidence-based insights about the landscape, the disease state landscape. And I always go back to, what are we doing? We're improving patient care. That's what we're doing. We're not, cost per learner and thousands of learners that were hit. That's not what we're doing. We're improving patient care. And I truly do think that this approach, a more mixed methods, a qualitative and quantitative AI, utilizing AI, this will get us there in a much more effective and powerful way. Our internal stakeholders are reacting to these types of analyses it's like they're blown away by the amount of insights, powerful insights that we can give them really quickly too. So yes, again, I mean, I like this topic. It's frustrating, but it's also super exciting. I mean, this is way better than QI/PI, guys. This is something else entirely. Back in the days.
Right, and we heard from Pam Mason earlier in the day that one of the differences, and we're not talking about company-led necessarily specifically here, but that one of the differences between CME and company-led is that we get larger audiences, but we also get these deeper insights.
Data, we get something back. They don't get that. There is no other function in medical affairs, right? So the scientific aspect of it, that is able to touch as many HCPs as we do in IME. It was always insanity that we weren't collecting standardized data when I first came into the field, like about 15 years ago. And now look at where we are. Incredible.
That's awesome.
That I was going to say, that's sort of inspiring. Like, it's inspiring what you're saying, Karen. It's getting me excited, because the next level of all this, as we talk about outcomes, right, would be to go think about patient outcomes and think about standardizing what they're putting as qualitative and being able to put that in a quantitative form to be able to evaluate that. And that, I think this opens the door. Like I said, this is the beginning, right? We're at the beginning of what's possible, because this will force us again to normalize what we have, to use a system that's meant directly for us, that can now go into deeper level outcomes that take you all the way through not only the learner journey, but the patient journey for successful outcomes.
And also, yes, absolutely, all of that. And also, I want to encourage our community to continue these discussions. Like, this is so important. And, thank you, CME Palooza, for allowing this space that is much more kind of grassroots, where we can have these kind of open discussions, and people can be challenging, and people can disagree. And we can say, I don't know where this is going. And yet, this is exciting, and it's a way for us to continue to evolve as an industry.
Great. So I think we're getting. Oh, do we have another question for us, Scott?
No, I know we're getting close. I know we have one more.
Yep. So I want to just touch base back in with the supporters, industry representatives that are here in this activity. We're just going to ask you the question that we asked you at the beginning of the program. How likely are you to support CME activities that incorporate AI technologies in the future? very likely, somewhat likely, or unlikely. Okay, we're in a similar place where we started, I think.
Yeah, but we converted the unlikely folks.
Good, our work here is done. No, not even close.
So, Karen, let me ask if I can ask you one question, because you're not professionally trained in AI. You're a data person, right?
Yeah.
So, how did you learn how to do all these things that you were talking about today?
So actually I am, because AI is, so when I talk about AI overall, I'm not talking about generative AI. I'm talking about natural language processing. I'm talking about machine learning. I'm talking about predictive modeling. I'm talking about all of that. I didn't work in large language models. I may have. I'm not sure. But the thinking is this. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thinking. But yeah, I mean, I did train in modeling.
Okay. So this just comes a little bit more natural. So then how do you, so for people who don't have this background, are there courses? Where do you start to learn how to do some of the nuts and bolts that you guys have kind of talked about kind of broadly today?
David, do you want to address that, or?
I wanted to go first, Karen, and I can follow up.
I'm not even to be honest with you. Geez, it's been a little while since I've been in school, and people who are much more intelligent than me at this point do all of my coding internally. So they've far surpassed me and actually have degrees, as data scientists, where they would be getting this training, absolutely. But in terms of like, how do you train yourself right now? I'm not even sure, David, because I do come back from a data background.
Yeah. So I mean, I would think the first thing, so, like I said before, it's not the nuts and bolts of the internal of how it works. It's about how to organize data and how to look at data. So,
Right.
It could be as simply looking at basic data analytics, taking some very basic courses on that, or even how to organize a data set. And in fact, it's not even the data piece that's important. It's how you look at the industry, like this data dictionary that we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's how you understand language, knowing your space and organizing your space so that you can break it down. Like, what do we call a learner? What do we call about, going back to the OSP, like, what's the core set of learning? Well, how do we define that? Like, once you can build definitions around that, the system can use those definitions to start analyzing the data, and then you can go from there, right? So you don't need to have a high level of mathematics or any of these data analytics. You just have to you need to know your space well enough that you can start defining boundaries and partitions in your space, so you can, when that comes back to you, you can analyze it in the right way. So I think there's a handshake there.
I want to caveat that though a little bit, because I do think I love working within a team, and I do think it's important to know when to hand it off, when to say, you know what, I can't do this. This is something like when it came to creating that database and those machine learning, those natural language processing models, I couldn't do that in that large of a data set. I had to get my programmers and engineers to actually build that system. So the reality is, I mean, yes, for the concept, absolutely, that you can do that without any training and a very basic level of understanding. But in order to implement it, I mean, I think you need people who know what they're doing, and that is a moving target because the space is evolving so quickly.
No, that's a good point, actually. And the part that we didn't talk about here, and it's another area of all this, is intellectual property and how that works, right? So a big piece of this, just so as we get in, to leave you with, is as you start developing your model and you decide who to help you, it makes sense. You bring in people to help you build your model. You want to make sure at the end of the day that the model that you have, one, can collaborate with others, but two, that you can retain the IP for that, because that's what you're going to build from, right? And I'm strong about this, because everyone should have a good core set that they understand that what their business is about, so that they can build that for whether it's outcomes or whether it's the learning objectives that you want to reach, whether you're coming from the supporter side or whether you're a provider. You want to know how you can use that and collaborate with others to continue to build these outcomes that can be personalized and very targeted for the job it needs to do. And you want to be able to retain that knowledge, which is why you want to build that core set. So whoever you get to help you, you need to understand what you're pulling out of that to be the core building blocks for your AI or for your core data set. That's important.
All right, great. Well, we're hitting right up against the hour, and I want people to be able to get to our next session. So just a few things to wrap up. We do have a brief survey at the bottom of our live tab to get a sense of who's watching, what topics they're interested in the future. If you want more education on AI, we will certainly bring this back again in the fall. And finally, no need to refresh your browser to view our next session. It is probably starting right now. Just click on the appropriate session link. So with that, I'd like to thank Alana, Karen, David. Thank you guys so much. Wonderful session, and we will see everyone soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.